The lights dimmed at 9:02 a.m., and the projector gave that obedient hum a machine makes when it's about to tell a very tidy lie. The first slide found the wall like it remembered the coordinates of its own arrival. Signal Noise Q3 Brand Narrative. The title lived in a typeface I had calibrated into our brand guide 7 years ago, kerning shaved to a proportion that makes executives feel smarter than they're being made. My margins, my grid, my voice curved into language that sounded like a sober promise from a company that sells certainty for a living. My name, however, had been erased so completely the corner where it used to breathe looked like a patch of fresh snow, untouched, unsuspicious, lying. On the other side of the glass wall sat the little city that decides what a quarter will remember. CEO at the head, CFO on her right, legal and compliance aligned like grammar, sales and product flanking like arguments that had learned to wear ties. 2 investors beamed in from rooms that looked like kitchens designed to hold art more than heat. And in the spotlighted center, Derek Miles, 38, 9 months in, resume built like a runway, voice engineered for applause. He held the clicker the way a man holds a story he didn't write. Too tight, like he's afraid the truth will wriggle out. He clicked. Slide 2. He clicked. Slide 3. Breath where I leave it. Silence the length I trained it to be. He deployed my line on slide 4 with the casual audacity of a pickpocket introducing himself to a policeman. Trust is an exchange of proofs, not promises. The CEO smiled without blinking. The investors nodded with the kind of gratitude rich people reserve for sentences that sound like a return. A laugh touched the table's far end, short, soft, polished like a spoon against bone china. If you measured the room with a stethoscope, you could have charted how belief circulates when words arrive in the body they don't belong to. I pressed the button on my own clicker. Mine. Identical. Cracked on the right edge since a trade show in 2019 when a vendor apologized to it like it understood. A red dot trembled on the glass and meant nothing. There's a red that is not a target so much as a confession. 17 years. 9 launches, 3 rebrands, 2 campaigns that paid for the chairs you're sitting on, and 1,000 slides that taught me pace is currency. It buys you attention even when you can't afford the truth. Experience does not make you visible. It makes your silence easier to borrow. My name is Liam Reynolds. I am 48 and tired in the way buildings are tired. Structurally sound, cosmetically unfashionable, insisting on gravity in a neighborhood that finally discovered mirrors. He kept going. Market segmentation, phrased so a nervous board can like you without understanding why. Audience clusters pulled out of surveys I refused to manipulate. Yes, no, it depends. Converted into a ladder the sales team could climb without falling off. KPIs hardened into numbers that don't need cologne. Plus an 11.4% qualified demos in 60 days, plus 1.7% variance. Brand Trust Index plus 0.9 at day 84. CPA down 13% with a 95% confidence interval and no prayer baked into the decimals. My numbers never flirt. They endure. He called them my analysis. He said our framework. He said I think 7 times as if opinion could substitute for authorship if you use enough air. The room glowed with rightness. Glass polished, carpet anesthetized, chairs at that angle humans unconsciously adopt when they believe their posture might be recorded. If you architect a room correctly, you can erase a man without raising your voice. The rehearsal ended in polite applause, the preferred volume of success when no one has budgeted for champagne. The CEO shook his hand and said, "Excellent clarity." The CFO adjusted his pen by a centimeter, the way accountants applaud. Legal stacked 2 folders thinner than the truth. I left before the lights remembered their faces. No one noticed the ghost leaving the room. The hallway carried that sterility offices wear after lunch and before a layoff. I passed a plaque that listed our values: integrity, innovation, fairness, in a font chosen because it made the words look like they'd been earned. I watched my reflection move across the glass doors like someone you wave to but don't invite. The door to my office closes with a tone that sounds like a good man lowering his voice. My computer woke with the patience of a machine that knows how to forgive. The shared drive offered the familiar cemetery of final files. Signal noise Q3 V6 final.pptx bore Derek's ownership like a ring that fits another man's finger too well. Bureaucracy is a wardrobe. Anyone can put on anyone. There are two ways to sign your name, loudly or correctly. Files remember, even when the humans don't. Properties, details, version, history. The ossuary where the truth keeps its teeth. L. Reynolds, created. July 10th, 11:58 p.m., Vigro 6. L. Reynolds, July 11th, 1:03 a.m., 0.9. Then 3 owner changes on Friday, 2:11 p.m., 2:24 p.m., 2:39 p.m., D. Miles. If theft is a sin of opportunity, erasure is a preference in settings. I did not touch a word. I did not add an initial to a corner. I did not perform the theater of the wronged. I built a faint, macro-free overlay that breathes only when the room decides to dim. In slideshow mode, and only then, a soft gray line appears in the bottom right. Original author and first save timestamp, pulled from the file's own memory, rendered at 60% so it asks to be seen but refuses to be loud. It prints on nothing. It hides from exports. It does not exist in edit view. It exists only where truth should, on the wall everyone is looking at. I tested at 10:42 p.m. on slide 7, the architecture slide, the one where the campaign becomes a building instead of a song. LR, created July 12th, 10:42 p.m. V1.0 hovered like a quiet pulse. The file had signed its own birth certificate. I saved V7 and went home to a kitchen that believes night is for forgiveness. The newsletter arrived Monday at 8:17 a.m., like a ribbon on a knife. Congratulations to Derek Miles and the creative strategy team. The photograph caught the moment he inhaled praise. If you studied the glass behind him, you could almost make out my outline, caught like a smudge on the wrong side of history. Comments frosted the page. Fresh energy. New voice. Vision. New is a verb here. It means we have decided to forget. HR booked. Quick sync on team alignment, which means we will ask you to be a gentleman while we carry your furniture to the attic. Melissa wore empathy like a soft armor. You've been such a pillar, she said. Pillars are celebrated the day before a renovation. We're flattening the structure, empowering newer voices. We'd love for you to mentor Derek as he transitions to a more visible role. Visible is a salary band disguised as a compliment. I said, of course, because there are corridors in a building where no other answer fits. By Wednesday, my calendar looked like a rib cage. Meetings I once fed were living off new hands. I walked past the Mariner glass and watched colleagues brainstorm my campaign with the satisfying ignorance of people who like the way their own adjectives sound. Promises that prove, someone wrote, and laughter gave permission for theft to feel like collaboration. I counted 3 recycled sentences, 2 inverted truths, 1 future memo titled Lessons Learned. Then I walked away so my face would not become an exhibit. Thursday, Rachel, the kind of assistant good men don't deserve, brought me a flash drive like a peace treaty. Derek asked for the early drafts, the ones with your author tags. For version tracking. That is the dictionary's definition of laundering. I smiled like a citizen. I'll send them when they're ready. She nodded like a person who believes in structure because school taught her to. I lock the drive in a drawer no one checks because they think dignity doesn't need keys. Friday, 6:08 p.m., Derek wrote, We're consolidating under my drive to streamline. Send your working drafts. Streamline is the word people use when the floor pads your step. I took screenshots of everything that could be denied later, zipped them into a file called attribution persist log.pdf, and named the folder Materials inside a parent folder called Nothing to See. Because sometimes accuracy is safer when it smiles. He put an optional catch-up on my calendar at 6:30. Optional is mandatory wearing cologne. His office smelled like the paper ambitions shed when they molt. You've been amazing, he said in the tone of a lifeguard congratulating the ocean. I'll take the board next week. Younger energy. I told him, speed without structure crashes. He told me, nod if the audience claps before it does. He thought applause deploys like an airbag. He hadn't met walls built by gravity yet. Saturday, at 8:04 a.m., the building sang its little access song and let me in because institutions love a man who keeps their hours. I extracted every author record like a careful archaeologist, encrypted the past into a quiet coffin labeled Archive, Ref 47, LR.zip, then made him a staircase easy to climb. Signal, noise, Q3, final, clean.pptx. It's not a trap if the room was already crooked. It's just architecture finishing its sentence. Monday, they moved my desk for flow. Flow is how rivers sound right before the bridge collapses. The wall turned into a mirror that hated details. Through the glass door, I watched performances happen at a safe distance. At 2:22 p.m., near the water cooler, someone said, "Retirement energy," as if the word energy could forgive anything it attaches to. I wrote it down because writing is how you forgive yourself for remembering. The night before the board meeting, Rachel slipped a sticky note, blue, calm, onto my keyboard. FYI, Derek's uploading your deck for the board review tomorrow. A schedule is a confession that doesn't know the word. I opened V7 and taught the overlay one more courtesy. If 10 or more slides share the same original author, the final slide would add a footnote at 60% gray, compiled from drafts authored by LR, not an accusation. A label, museums live by them. Tuesday, 8:59 a.m., the boardroom colonized by light. He moved through the slides with that smooth, aerodynamic voice that fools the air into thinking it's been promoted. At 9 to 12, the bottom right gained a conscience. LR, created July 12, 10:42 p.m. V1.0. CFO, what's that? Derek. Formatting. Slide 8 contradicted him. LR, July 11, 1:03 a.m. V0.9. CEO, who is LR? Compliance, Liam Reynolds. 17 years. First author on 23 of 32. The room discovered silence as a process. Legal's folder opened like a small, polite mouth. Policy 3.14. Attribution must persist through all internal and external drafts. The CEO turned and found me through glass the way people find a landmark after getting lost inside a city they built. Liam, would you take the client pitch next week? I'll bring proof, not promises, I said, and meant it like a budget. He set the clicker down the way a man sets a future on a table when he realizes it doesn't belong to him. The red diode blinked once like a vein that remembers childhood. The collapse was respectable, which is the only kind executives will allow. No one yelled. The projector hummed. The overlay, small, gray, boring, corrected the room without asking it to cry. The week after, the air became heavier in the good way. Conversations shortened into facts. People started checking the corners of their slides as if conscience had acquired a font. Melissa pinged. We met. I slid a single-page spec. Quarterly attribution audits. First save pinned with admin-only override. Internal watermark only in presentation mode. 15-minute training called Attribution as Process. Conflict resolution logged by Legal plus Compliance and visible in Archive. Reasonable, she said. Reasonable is what a bureaucracy calls something it can afford. Marco locked down the creative share with a craftsman's decency. First save attribution pinned. Export logs mirrored to compliance. Version forks named like children in a family that knows its history. He didn't ask why. He liked when chaos learns geometry. Friday, 9:14 a.m., the CEO told the company, from this quarter, attribution will be visible internally. Not to punish, to protect. I demoed 5 slides, none of them dramatic. It doesn't accuse, I said. It frames. An intern, small, brilliant, smiled like a person who had just watched their future grow a spine. Monday again, same room, same slide, different temperature. I presented in a voice that refuses to sell emotion because math doesn't appreciate it. When we ended, the client applauded once. Firm, satisfied, brief. Rachel lingered afterward. "Mr. Reynolds, does the overlay mean you wrote all this?" "No," I said. "It means no one's initials disappear again." She nodded, like a person cataloging an inheritance. Derek's HR email arrived 2 weeks later. Staff transition update. The company reacted like good science, with adjusted variables and no gossip. Policy 3.14 became 3.14.2, an operational clause with my fingerprints and no need for my name. People began saying, "Let me make sure your name's on that." And the world got 1 degree less cruel in a room almost no one notices. He found me in the pantry on a Thursday that would have been anonymous if regret didn't need to eat. "Morning, Liam." The fatigue in his posture was architectural, the kind that happens when you remove a beam and the ceiling tries to pretend. "You humiliated me," he said. "No," I said. "The truth did." I stopped interrupting it. He said he learned something. I told him to make sure it was measurable. He said people like me won. I said variables don't win, systems correct. He left with a nod that made no sound, which is the best kind of apology a room can afford. Months later, the overlay picked up a nickname, the Ghost Line. People checked it before they presented the way you check a door before sleeping. Objects remember what people forget. The clicker still had its crack. The bottom right corner still kept a diary no one could burn. The boardroom still wore glass like it wanted to teach you to see yourself before you spoke. One evening, late, I turned on the projector in an empty room, pressed the button, and watched the red dot land on a white wall like a period at the end of a sentence that no longer needed to be defended. Created by LR, July 12, 10:42 p.m. VV 1.0. Author, date, version. The whole story dissolves to those 3 coordinates if you let it. Outside, the city arranged itself in lines that meant nothing and everything. Streetlights learning choreography, windows rehearsing honesty. Inside, the building exhaled like a man who finally understood he didn't need applause to breathe. I shut the projector, and the dark didn't feel like absence. It felt like balance. I used to believe fairness was the sound a room made when it liked you. Now I believe it's the silence a system keeps when you don't have to raise your voice. Revenge is noisy because it lacks confidence in time. Justice is the way time behaves when you leave it alone with the facts. I still come in early. I still pour to the same line on the mug. I still turn the clicker over in my palm like a coin that never buys anything but keeps me honest about weight. Somewhere, in a PDF with a number instead of a title, there's a sentence that keeps interns from being erased because a man once spent 17 years learning how to make a room tell the truth without screaming. That is enough. Some days, it feels like mercy. On the rest, it feels like math behaving itself in public. And if you ask me what the story was really about, I'll tell you it wasn't about me, or Derek, or a slide that found a wall on a Tuesday. It was about a small gray line that decided a room would never again forget where the work began. You can build a city out of that sort of memory. Or at least, you can stop one from being bulldozed every quarter. The company learned to breathe differently after that day. You could hear it in the rhythm of the hallways, the shorter sentences, the pauses before names, the newfound respect people offered to the corners of their screens. Even silence became deliberate, like everyone had agreed not to disturb something fragile but sacred. The overlay, the little gray ghost line, became the most disciplined employee we had. It showed up on time, spoke only when spoken to, and never once took credit for its own existence. I didn't design it to be famous. I built it to be accurate. But fame, like guilt, has a habit of finding the things that quietly embarrass hypocrisy. Soon, people from other departments were asking if they could borrow the overlay system. Product wanted it for design files. Finance wondered if it could tag spreadsheet macros. Even HR, the secular church of good intentions, asked if they could embed it in policy drafts. The system was becoming a conscience, and consciences, when institutionalized, look suspiciously like progress. The week Derek left, I found his old pen in the conference drawer. Chrome body, medium tip, his initials etched on the clip like the memory of entitlement. I held it the way you hold a relic from a religion you no longer practice. I didn't throw it away. I didn't keep it either. I placed it in the supply cabinet next to the bulk pens and watched it disappear into democracy. That felt right. People started saying Reynolds Clause whenever compliance mentioned the new rule. I hated the sound of it, the way it made justice sound like a brand. But there it was, written in black text on the company intranet. Policy 3.14.2, Attribution Integrity Protocol, the Reynolds Clause. Every file created, presented, or exported within company infrastructure must retain its original authorship data. No manual override without compliance approval. Simple, elegant, final. The day it went live, Rachel came by with 2 coffees. "You know it's kind of historic," she said, placing one on my desk. "Policy with a person's name in it." "Policies shouldn't have names," I said. Still, she smiled. "This one means people like me get to stay visible." That stopped me. It's strange how justice feels theoretical until you hear it spoken by someone who didn't have it before. I raised my cup. Then visibility it is. By late spring, I began noticing a pattern. Meetings grew shorter, but decisions lasted longer. Slides got cleaner, but conversations became more honest. The company wasn't kinder. Kindness isn't scalable. But it had become more precise. Precision is a quieter form of respect. One afternoon, the CEO invited me to a leadership offsite, a gesture people mistake for gratitude. "You've changed our culture," she said. "You restored something we didn't know was broken." I replied, "It was always broken. I just gave it a mirror," she laughed softly. "That's cynical." "No," I said. "That's maintenance." At the offsite, Derek's name came up once indirectly. Someone mentioned the presentation incident as if it were a natural disaster. I listened without contributing. History is what happens when people get the order of names wrong long enough to feel comfortable about it. That night, alone in my hotel room, I opened my laptop and checked the overlay system. The code hadn't been touched. The line still drew itself faithfully at 60% opacity, an old rule doing its quiet job. I stared at it and realized the thing had outgrown me. It didn't need a guardian anymore. It just needed to exist. Summer arrived with the same indifference all corporate summers have. Bright mornings, dim souls, air conditioning set to 17 degrees to prove control. One morning, an intern named Holly knocked on my door. She held a printout of slide thumbnails like a nervous witness. "I think someone's removed attribution from these exports," she said. Her voice trembled between curiosity and principle. "Whose slides?" I asked. "Derek's replacement." Adam. There it was, the pattern again, repainted, renamed, replayed. Ghosts are not supernatural. They're systemic. I took her laptop and opened the file. The overlay was gone. Not corrupted, deleted manually. The metadata showed a clean break. Adam H. as sole author, timestamped 3:02 a.m. "You did good bringing this to me," I said. "Now forget you saw it." Her eyes widened. "But trust me, forgetting is part of proof." That afternoon, I sent the deck to compliance. No commentary, just the raw file. Within 24 hours, a note went out. Attribution breach under review. Adam's calendar turned gray. The system corrected itself again. I didn't need to say a word. Proof behaves like gravity. You can't escape it. You can only measure how fast you fall. By September, I realized I hadn't been angry in months. Anger had been replaced by calibration. There's peace in knowing your job is simply to make lies inconvenient. My days became repetitions of small rituals. The same black coffee, same early train, same quiet entrance into a building that had learned to whisper instead of shout. Sometimes I'd see Derek's ghost. Not the man, but his pattern, in new hires, in how ambition learns to hide theft behind enthusiasm. I didn't judge it. I just built systems that made it irrelevant. On October 12th, the company hosted its annual Innovation Forum. Someone had suggested giving out an EW, award for cultural contribution. I wasn't on the list of nominees. Good recognition is applause disguised as paperwork. When they announced the winner, it wasn't a person, it was a tool. The Attribution Integrity Overlay, read the slide. The audience clapped. Somewhere, the ghost line smiled. After the ceremony, the CEO found me at the coffee station. "You know," she said, "most people would have fought harder for credit." "Credit is just the past tense of trust," I said. "I prefer the present tense," she nodded slowly. "You're a difficult man to promote." "I'm already promoted," I said. I just stopped needing a new title for it. Late that year, we renovated the 10th floor. They built new conference rooms with smarter walls, acoustic panels, motion lighting, the kind of tech that makes people feel they've invented focus. I was asked to test the presentation system before launch. Alone in the largest room, I connected my laptop. The new projector woke up with a deeper hum than the old one, a tone that sounded almost human. Slide 1. Signal. Noise. The overlay appeared exactly where it should, like a ghost reclaiming its coordinates. I stood at the head of the table, holding the same clicker, the one still cracked on its right edge. The red beam lit the far wall, steady, unwavering. For a second, I thought I saw movement in the glass. Derek's reflection, younger, confident, rehearsing the same stolen rhythm. Maybe it was just the ghost of memory, looping its final frame. "You were right about one thing," I whispered to the room. "The audience always claps before the crash." I clicked again. The next slide appeared, clean, factual, cold. My favorite kind. Proof doesn't need charisma. It just needs light. Standing there, I realized something quietly devastating. This was no longer revenge. It never had been. It was restoration, of balance, of authorship, of a system that had finally learned to see itself in the mirror without flinching. The clicker felt lighter in my hand now. Maybe because I no longer needed to aim it at anyone. December came with snow that looked like dust falling in slow motion. The office turned down its lights, half empty for the holidays. I stayed late one night, not to finish work, but to remember what silence used to sound like before it was earned. I walked through the dark floor. Desks, screens, empty chairs, all of them small memorials to the hours we trade for relevance. In the glass reflection of the main boardroom, I saw myself. Older, quieter, the kind of man who no longer confuses proof with validation. I entered the room and turned on the projector. The fan started with a sigh, then steadied into that same low hum I'd memorized years ago. The wall brightened. The overlay appeared, simple as a signature, created by LR, July 12th, 10:42 p.m. V1.0, I whispered. Still here. It wasn't pride. It was confirmation. The system had survived me. That's how justice should end. Self-sustaining, indifferent, unbreakable. I shut down the machine, placed the clicker in the drawer, and left the room exactly as it was. No message, no note, no trace except what the files already knew. Outside, the city blinked through glass and fog, its lights mapped like a network diagram. Every window was another version of a file waiting to be saved. I took the long way to the train, passing buildings that looked exactly like ours. Same steel, same glass, same moral geometry. Somewhere inside each of them, there's a man counting slides that no longer bear his name, learning how to turn that silence into structure. He'll make his own ghost line. And maybe that's enough. I thought about fairness, the most misused word in the English language. Fairness isn't equality. It's accuracy. It's the moment a system admits what actually happened and agrees to remember it correctly. Fairness is when the truth finally stops being temporary. When I reached the station, a cold wind cut across the platform, sharp and exact. I liked that. It felt honest. The train pulled into the station, slow and exact. I stepped out into the kind of cold that doesn't hurt. It just tells the truth. Behind me, the office lights were still awake, humming with their quiet rituals of proof and process. Justice didn't shout that day. It just stayed. Sometimes the best revenge is a system that remembers. Sometimes The cleanest win is when you no longer need to explain why you deserve credit. I looked up at the skyline. Thousands of windows. Thousands of stories, and wondered how many people were still fighting to be seen. Have you ever been erased at work and found a way to make the system remember you? Tell your story in the comments. I read every one, and if you believe in quiet justice, like the video and subscribe to The Office Revenge Diaries, where every story ends with dignity restored.